We are going to call the St. Louis Park School Board meeting to order tonight on Monday, May 13th. I'm Mary Tomback. I am our vice chair, sitting in this evening for Nancy Gores, our chair, who is out of town. So first up, we are going to do the spotlight.
So thank you. We are going to spotlight the students who were part of the Civil Rights Research Experience. We went over spring break and just really appreciate their commitment to preparation for it, so Saturday classes, and then also commitment to the experience. And so when I call your name, you're going to come up and get your certificate. Zoe Younger. Do you want to receive? Isabel Connie. Jada Witherspoon. Madeline Eduardo Gonzalez. Krishana Spencer. Tony Longs Jr. Ezra Hudson. Joshua Smith. And August Johnflu. And Lyric Robinson was not able to make it, but we can clap for Lyric. Pardon? Yes, they want to get you together for which one?
Right about where you are.
Show us a picture. Oh, I'm in the picture?
Yes.
Oh.
How do you want it?
I need to get you out of the.
So we need to come forward.
Yep. If you can't see me, I can't see you.
Come over this way.
That's the rule.
You're not tall. Oh, here. Thank you. She wanted it like this.
And I should have acknowledged Dr. Leanne Stevens before she had to stand up and start talking. I apologize for that. But that was Dr. Stevens, and we'll be hearing more from her shortly. All right, so next on to the approval of the agenda. There is going to be one change to the agenda tonight. We are actually going to switch community education youth programs with long-term facility maintenance funding strategy. We're going to flip them so that our students who are presenting as part of community education program don't have to stay any longer than necessary. So with those changes, the agenda would be next, superintendent's report, then our study session topics, which would be the Civil Rights Research Experience presentation by our students that we just met, the long-term facility maintenance, community education youth programs, I did just say that, long-term facility maintenance funding strategy, core planning report, policy development first reading of policies 515, protection and privacy of pupil records, 901, community education, and 902, use of school district facilities and equipment. Next up, policy development second reading of policies 799, post-issuance debt compliance, and 820, closing of a school building. Then we have our consent agenda. We move on to our action agenda, which includes policy development second readings, communications, and transmittals. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So move.
Moved by Ann, second. Second by Karen, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. All right, first up is our superintendent's report. Superintendent Osai.
Good evening, Vice Chair Tombeck, members of the board. This evening for my superintendent's report, I would like to share a few informational items connected to the strategic direction of our organization. The first item that I would like to share is connected to the upcoming PSI Farewell Open House, which will be held at Central on Monday, May 20th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. As you all are aware, as part of our Strategy 4 facility strategy, Park Spanish Immersion will be moving to Cedar Manor, and this will create an opportunity for the community, former classmates, families, teachers, and staff to come together and say farewell to Central. Well, PSI at Central. Central will certainly still be there as our early childhood program, and ultimately the district office will be moving there. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge and congratulate the ECHO for recently receiving a National Peace Online Peacemaker Award. The ECHO was one of 18 school districts across the country to receive this award, and this is the highest award given out by the NSPA. The ECHO was judged or selected for their online coverage and content, quality of writing and reporting, leadership design, photography, and graphics. So congratulations to Lori Keekley and all of the students on the ECHO. Lastly, I would just like to take a moment, and I share this only because it's the first ever high school drone race to occur, so I wanted to make sure that I made sure everyone was aware that on Saturday, this upcoming Saturday, May 18th, from 10 to 4 p.m. at Apple Valley High School, we'll be taking on the Apple Valley Eagles in the drone race, and Mark Miller's Engineering 3 class will be participating in this race, and my belief is that St. Louis Park will come out victorious in the first drone race and continue to be victorious from there on. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent Osai. I look forward to our reign as the drone race champions of Minnesota. Okay, first up, we have, again, the Civil Rights Research Experience presentation by Dr. Leanne Stevens, who is one of our equity instructional coaches, and the students who attended the Civil Rights Research Experience. Take it away.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the school board for supporting us and being here today, and also the Superintendent Osai and all the parents that are here today. So we're going to take you through our experience on the Civil Rights Research Experience this year, 2019. The theme this year was In Still I Rise, Poetically Just Us, and we traveled to Memphis, Tennessee, Tuskegee, Montgomery, and Selma, Alabama, and Jackson, Mississippi. So thank you for being here. With no further ado. Oh, and I'm Jada Witherspoon. And
I'm Zoe Younger, and and so to start off this experience, we went to 5 Saturday sessions, and there we learned a little bit about our African history and then African American history, which we don't usually learn in like a normal classroom setting. So that was really interesting. And then we also got to go a little bit more in depth on critical race theory and the 5 tenets. And then we also got time to reflect on what we had learned and write what we are like feeling and what we had learned down. And so I have a poem that I wrote, and I will share that with you real quick. Black stars. You know who else is a black star? Mansa Musa, a rich history from the motherland. They want to believe they are not our descendants when they oppress us and make us beg for more amendments. Like they don't know Alexander the Great turned around in Mali and that Musa society traded with everybody. You know who else is a black star? Miss Betty Fikes. Gospel music straight from the soul, collectivism, unity, something we've lost, reinstilled in our hearts in just an hour. You know who else is a black star? Derek Bell. Critical race theory. He knew our systems were white, so he thought of a theory to make things right, challenging dominant systems of oppression. Maybe they'll have a takeaway from this lesson. Examining the unequal distribution of power and resources because black power can battle these forces. Counter storytelling, permanence of racism, whiteness as property, Interest Conversion, Critique of Liberalism. You know who else is a black star? James Baldwin. Literature as a means to speak out against injustice, become a threat, and make us remember this house. White is a metaphor for power, so power is a reward, not a right. But he is not your Negro. We are not your Negroes. You know who else is a black star? Reverend Dr. Michael Martin Luther King Jr., the most dangerous and effective Negro leader. Public enemy number one. I have a dream to beyond Vietnam, man to king to enemy to myth. You know who else is a black star? Miss Afria, we can do this. Ancestral presence, the master, the woman, the mother, the free. A changing narrative, a changing face from Africa to the United States. She can portray the many to show the history we possess, to drop our shackles and leave them on the ground, see the past and march on. You know who else is a black star? Miss Joanne Bland. Southern hospitality in her stories, sisters and brothers who came out to see us, joining her and sharing her experience. Respect and a short leash. Love for us, her nephews and nieces. We stand in the footsteps of history makers, so we must be history makers too. You know who else is a black star? Medgar Evers, the movement of Mississippi, the wave in a pond. A writer and speaker, always dodging bombs, always dropping bombs, fighting for voting rights to reject the voice of the people, but shot in his driveway because white noise wants the silence of black people. You know who else is a black star? Stevens, August, Ezra, Izzy, Jada, Josh, Lyric, Kashana, Maddie, Tony, me. You know who else is a black star? Knowledge of self. Share this knowledge right here with everyone else.
My name is Tony. I'm a junior. Basically, late night debriefs is since we was like all day we were doing something, we were learning more about our history and our past and our culture and all that. We took a time out. We got to like our place of rest. It was usually around like 10:30, and we take like an hour and a half just to reflect and talk with each other about our experience and of everything that happened to us. And like even if it was difficult to write because we were experiencing so much, we had people there to help us to like break down our writing so it could be easier. And it gave us time to come up with poems and other stuff, reflective pieces and stuff like that.
And if I could add, excuse me, I'm Josh Smith, and the purpose of late night debriefs is mostly because we experience a lot of things throughout the day, and to be able to come home later that night and more analyze the things that we went through and experienced and absorbed all over that day just helps us process everything that we have learned like, throughout the trip. Like, these happen every single night so that we can come back and apply this knowledge to everything else.
Yeah. I forgot to say that we participated with Wayzata School District, St. Anthony, New Brighton, and then also the Science Museum. The Science Museum has a teen program there, and so I think it was like 4 or 5 students from the Science Museum also joined us with a plethora of adults. No, that's true.
Okay, so my name is Krishana Spencer, and our first stop was in Memphis, Tennessee, and in Memphis we visit the National Civil Rights Museum, which is connected to the Lorraine Motel, which is the place where Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated at on April 4th, 1968. And the museum started off at the transatlantic slave trade, and it go through all the events Dr. King participated in and organized. And the ending of the museum was viewing Dr. King's room he was staying in, and also seeing the balcony he was on where he got shot. And after we was done viewing the museum, we was able to go across the street to another museum where James Earl Ray was when he assassinated Dr. King, and learned the counter-narrative about James Earl Ray. And the counter-narrative we learned about the museum was that after Dr. King was assassinated, they turned the Lorraine Motel into a low-income housing place for African Americans. And when they decided to make the Civil Rights Museum, they kicked everyone who was staring at out, and one of those people they kicked out was Jacqueline Smith, who has been protesting there since 1988. And when we was down there, she was still outside protesting, and she was protesting for because they put all the money into the museum, but they can't put the money into helping low-income families. So she's been protesting for over 3 decades.
One of our next stops, well, I'm Ezra Hudson. One of our next stops was in Tuskegee, where we went and saw Tuskegee University, which is a HBCU, historically black college and university. And some of the history behind Tuskegee was it was created by W.F. Foster, who was running for Alabama Senate, and he wanted to get the black people's vote, so he asked Lewis Adams, a former slave, what would he want in turn for the black people's vote, and he said a school. So that's when they got legislation passed for the normal Negro school in Tuskegee, which is now Tuskegee University. And then Tuskegee University, a lot of the buildings on the campus are on the outside, same like original brick, but on the inside they've been continually updated. On the campus, we went to the main church on campus, and inside the church, you saw the stained glass windows, which are made after 12 Negro spiritual songs. And the building of the church has actually been studied because the first time it was built, it was struck down by lightning. So the second time, they built it with no right angles, so it wouldn't get struck again. Right outside the church, we saw where George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington, who was the first teacher at Tuskegee, he came from Hampton Institute. We saw where they were buried and their burial grounds, and there's like a cemetery there too.
I'm Izzy Connie, I'm a junior. Next we went to the Legacy Museum and the Lynching Memorial. But the Legacy Museum, we weren't allowed to take pictures, so none of them are featured on this slide, but I'll tell you about it. So in the Legacy Museum, when you first walk in, it starts with the arrival of enslaved Africans in the United States, and it has stories from enslaved Africans, and also they had banners hanging from ceiling to floor of descriptions of slaves that were written by slave masters that were basically used in auctions of slaves. And then next, when you walk further into the museum, was segregation and the civil rights movement and how that affected the United States. It had stories from Dr. King and Malcolm X, along with other stories. And then further into the museum, there was information about mass incarceration and false accusations, people that were imprisoned when they didn't do anything wrong or they had very minor charges and they've been given life sentences. A lot of stories were there was video stories, and then there was also stories written by letters of prisoners. And the museum has them displayed all around to show the impact that mass incarceration has on the United States today. So then next we went to the Lynching Memorial, and when you first walk through the memorial, you see these statues, which are the pictures right there. And it's enslaved Africans in America, and you can see their chains and everything to symbolize the fight and everything that they went through. And then next, as you go further, in the background of the same picture, you can see the big plaques that were hanging to show different counties of different states and all the accounts of lynchings with the names of the people and the dates that they were lynched. And they're hanging all throughout the memorial. And as you walk, they start to hang further above you as if they were people being lynched. They're about the size of bodies. So that's the effect that you get as you're walking through it. And then towards the end of the memorial, you see different accounts of why these people were lynched, which are things that nobody should lose their life over, like not letting a white man win in a fight or using the wrong drinking fountain were reasons that people were lynched. And then this other photo is the 3 lynchings that occurred in Duluth, Minnesota, and the 3 people.
Hi, my name is August Yampler. After the lynching memorial, we made our way to the Middle Passage experience, or the slave experience, where we met Afria We Can Do This, who was our slave master at the time. At the beginning of the experience, when we got off the bus, the men had to open their legs with their hands against the wall while being patted down like police officers do. Women had to open their palms to see whether they were going to work in the field or in the house, and they opened their mouth to see how old they were. They turned them around and bent them over to see how many kids they could have, fully violating them. Moving forward from the searches, she made us stand in line, shoulder to shoulder, with our hands on one another as if we were zombies, acting as if we had shackles on our feet. When we got to our first destination, the bridge, we all lined up, and it was then she called out the good and slave, who ended up having to pick out one person, each from the line, as the masters would. Having two slaves either fight to death, and if a slave didn't want to fight and he tried to give up his spot, he would die along with two of the other enslaved. After the bridge, we passed over into kind of an abandoned house/shop, which we later found out was a slave holding pen for mulatto women. Still shoulder to shoulder, we made our way up the stairs and walked inside of the place and heard loud screaming as if somebody were being kidnapped or killed. We stood there listening to the screams for about 5 minutes, when then our master at the time gave us 2 minutes with a tiny light to get up on the ship and into a small little storage room, which would essentially be the belly of the ship. When everyone reached the small room, which was about 40 to 50 people in the belly of the ship, everyone got really emotional because everyone was so tied into the experience that they felt the ancestral presence. Excuse me. After the Middle Passage experience,
Okay, so after they had us come off the boat, we all stood around and like it's kind of like a crowd when everyone was all emotional. And like she had came out in a different outfit, and we didn't know it was her at first. And she was crawling around and she was crying, and it had made everyone get really emotional. And she was asking where her child was, and then she had came up to me and said that my mom had gone on to a better place and had asked me to start a new family with her, and then she hugged me. It made me tear up a little bit. It's a real emotional experience.
And so the purpose of the experience was so that we could really experience the horror of slavery, of enslavement, which so often I've heard people say, oh, we should just get over it. And our country still has a lot of healing to do from it. And so to go through that experience, I had to keep reminding myself that it was only an hour and a half that my ancestors experienced this. And for me, it was just a simulation. But it was in my head so much that I wanted to be perfect. I didn't want to look at her. I didn't want her to think that I was out of line. And I always had in my head, I would always say, oh, I'd be an awful slave or whatever. And in that moment, I wanted to be perfect. And so even when she had taken a group in to the holding pen, some of us were still on the stairs and we didn't move. And so just for that time, that had impacted our psyche, just for that moment. So just imagining what our ancestors had gone through.
After the Middle Passage experience, we went on a tour with Joanne Bland, who was the co-founder and former director of the Civil Rights Museum. We toured the town of Selma and stopped at the Brown AME Chapel, where the march departed from. Ms. Bland took us around the back of the church to the very ground that marked the starting point. She had each of us pick up a pebble and told us stories of the individuals who had stood on those pebbles on the day of the march. During our time in Selma, Joanne Bland told us about the below-the-line narrative of what happened in the parts they didn't tell us in school about Bloody Sunday. When they first left the church without MLK on March 7th of 1965, they were tortured and brutalized by officers, as many people know. But Joanne Bland told us the below-the-line narrative, which is even when the march was over and they got off the bridge, they were followed back to the church where they were continuously brutalized. They were thrown against the walls. They had broken bones, and even to the point where Joanne's dad couldn't get to her when they lived 2 blocks down the street because police were on the street terrorizing them. They killed people inside of the church, and they kept following them, which is what people don't hear.
So after leaving Alabama, we went to Jackson, Mississippi to visit the Museum of Mississippi History and Civil Rights. And in there, the museum is like split into 2 sides. So it's one side with the civil rights, and then the other side is the Mississippi history. So we started off in the civil rights side, and in that side, they utilized the whole space and covered the whole space with facts about the civil rights movement. And on the Mississippi history side, it was just, they didn't utilize the whole space. It was just space open. And in the civil rights side, there was like big pillars of the accounts of lynching just in Mississippi. So it was like 10 big pillars, front and back, of lynchings and reasons why they was lynched. And it was also on a Mississippi history side, they had statues of enslaved people acting like they was happy and they was happy slaves. They was content with slavery, and they also had the Native Americans, like had statues of Native Americans as if they were happy with, like easily converted to like the Christianity and all of that. And we like spent like an hour or so in the civil rights side, but like most of us, when we went to the Mississippi history side, we was like in there for like no more than like 5 minutes because it was so cringy and it was just not very comfortable. And what we learned about at the museum on the civil rights side was that Mississippi they didn't start the Jim Crow laws, but they initiated it, which made all the other states in the South follow them with the Jim Crow laws. And it was the most brutal out of all the South states, but we don't hear about that. We mostly hear about Alabama. So.
I'm Maddie Gonzalez. So we talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and we talk about Malcolm X, but we don't talk about Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers is a Jackson, Mississippi native. He served in the Army, and then he came home and he served in his community with social justice and racial justice. He spoke to his community and he interacted with his community. And since he was a leader considerably, he was a target. So like someone did say behind me, he was shot and killed when he got home in his driveway. And his home was built like a safety net. We like to say his roof was fireproof, and so you couldn't light it on fire when people would throw things like bottle fires. His door was specifically on the side of his house, so you couldn't just walk up into it. He had to see you come into his house. His windows were built multiple feet above the ground, unlike any other house in his neighborhood, so that you couldn't throw bricks in his house. You couldn't throw anything in his house that would hit the level of his children or the level of his wife. So his home when we went on the street, it was a really narrow street. We had a really big bus. As you can imagine, it was really hard to get around that street. But the neighborhood was still the same. His home was the only home that was still intact. It was a beautiful home. We had the honor in being able to walk through the whole home. We saw his room, his bedroom, his children's room, the living room, and we actually saw from his living room the home that shot the bullet through his home, through the living room, the kitchen wall, the toaster, and the refrigerator. So we saw the impact of how he was also targeted, and we saw that house that it actually came from. So Medgar Evers should definitely be somebody that is in the history books that we don't talk about.
So next, we went to Mason Temple where Dr. King gave his last speech, Mountaintop. And this actually was not planned. So it was kind of great to go there and like stand in the presence of Dr. King. And this is a place where we could share like our stories and the impact of the trip. And we all it was a safe place for us to cry and be emotional and not be judged. And we're all everyone had each other's back because it was a great place to just open up and just say how you felt and how the trip impacted you. And we also had dinner there as well. So it was a great place to just open up and be ourselves and not be judged for that. So it was nice.
And they all got to stand where Dr. King stood when he gave his mountaintop speech. So it was a great experience for the students. And so that concludes our showing you our journey. And if a few students would like to just say one takeaway and a change they would like to see. So we don't, probably not everyone, but whoever wants to come up.
One change I would like to see is that staff members go on this trip because they're the ones who are educating the younger generation, and they should know some of these things, and so that when they come back and educate the students, they would know that. And one takeaway that I got from the trip was just like learning the counter narrative of certain stories that we don't hear every day in school, or that are not in our history books. So.
One takeaway I had from this trip was a lot of times in museums I read about the casual brutalization and mutilization of black bodies, and how like that was just something that was normal back then, and I didn't really know that before.
One takeaway I had was how uneducated I had felt before going on the trip, and after I felt like I had knew so much more, but it shouldn't be like that. I felt like I should have learned most of this at school, and one change I would like to see is for history, U.S. history, to be more accurate in representing what happened to black people in America.
One change I would like to see would be in the education system, because throughout all the museums and things we went through, I saw that like buildings changed and laws changed, but the education was always still the same. Like schools integrated, but it was still like the same basic stories and like the same things we learned in our history books. And I feel like that's part of the reason why we can't move on, because we're still learning the same things from so long ago, and it needs to be updated. And also we need counter narratives. We either need both sides of the narrative or we need the correct story. So I feel like that needs to change quick.
Wait, could you all stay up there? I'm sorry, just a second, in case anybody has any questions. We're not going to let you get away that quickly, sorry. Aaron?
So I know you put in 5 Saturdays, but I know from my son's experience, it wasn't just 5 Saturdays. It was a lot of work. Could you just give us a little more detail about how many hours you were on campus? You were at the U of M, right? And just a little more detail about the preparation, because I know you had a lot of preparation in addition to your regular class load, right? This is extra school before you even go on this trip. Thank you.
So it wasn't just like a lunch break in the middle of a Saturday. It was 5 Saturdays in a row from 9 a.m. to noon, a whole month straight before the trip. You said as an extra classroom, but it was a classroom that we actually enjoyed, because for once we were the narrative we were being learned about. The engagement and the amount of excellence that they expected from us was really high, and I feel like we excelled that. They said multiple times that we were complimented and that it showed really well. We came in ready every Saturday with notebooks, pencils. Our phones were put away. You didn't have to ask us for that. Our attention was full on the board, and we wanted to learn. And we also had work after too. We had meetings after. This is, I think, like the 4th or 5th presentation we've had. The same day we had another presentation. The day after we had 2 presentations. So this is a continue of work. We work before and we work after. So.
And the days were long. They got up at like 6 in the morning, 6 or 7. And was it 6? Yeah, okay. 6. It was 6. And we didn't get back and get in there. They probably didn't get into their beds until like 11 or 11:30. And so, or 12. Okay. And then even on the buses. So as we took the buses from city to city, state to state, they had work to do on the buses as well. So we utilized that as a mobile classroom. And it was quite the commitment. And so some students who don't really show up here showed up brilliantly. It gets me really emotional because they showed up brilliantly on this experience, Saturdays, because that was the expectation. So there was an expectation of excellence, and you get what you expect. And when you teach to excellence, you get excellence. And that's what I saw in this experience.
It's a fabulous takeaway, truly.
I have a question. So, this is what, the fourth time? Third time? So, and each time it just gets better and better and better. I would say this was, not to say that the others were bad or even worse, but this was a depth of knowledge that I had never seen before from this group or any groups before. So,
I agree with you. I felt like this was absolutely the best.
So that's what I wanted to hear. And I anticipate that this is just going to get better and better and better as we get more mature into this this work, and it's great. You guys did a fantastic job.
We had amazing adults. We had Tish Jones, who's a spoken word artist. We had, of course, Mr. Galloway, Anthony Galloway, who was our leader. But we also had people from like all walks, amazing adults, who you would have thought that we all had known each other for years. Just come and love our children, love them. And everywhere we went, literally every place we went on this journey, they were complimenting. So they represented St. Louis Park to the utmost. Like, people were so amazed. I don't know what they expected. Like, I don't know what they expected from them. But they just exuded excellence. And so I was just like so proud. And it was interesting because when we got back to the airport, we got back into Minneapolis at the end of our experience. We don't call it a trip because it's not a trip. It was an experience. So a woman came to me and she was like, "Did you all just come back from somewhere?" And I was like, "Yes, we did." And she's like, "They seem like a family," and that's pretty much how we did it. It was a very collective, which was so important for me because people of color are collective people. So it was a collective atmosphere. And just one example, we were on the bus and there was some water that was spilled. And it was everybody had gotten off and there was one student and we looked back, we were like, "Oh, somebody needs to clean up that water." And he's like, "Well, I didn't do it." And we stopped him and we were like, "Yes, you did." Because one thing that one person, it impacts all of us. And so it was not it was not individual, we were a community. And so if one thing happened, then we were all impacted. He's like, "Oh, I got it, I understand." And so he never said that again. So they knew, even if I didn't make the mess, because I'm part of this community, this collective, I'm going to clean it up. And so, and they held each other accountable, and they loved each other. And so it was just really a beautiful experience for them. And I'm so honored. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of it. I love these kids so much. I love our children so much. And they don't get the honor that it's due. So, thank you.
First day, there wasn't really like talking much. We did like different schools, but I kind of have to like get a feel for it naturally. So I feel like that was a great way to have all of us come together like that.
This isn't a question, just a thank you. I'm so grateful for all of you, and you know, we've talked a lot this year about student voice and getting more student voice, and so I'm really, really glad to hear your voices in the room tonight, and I hope that we hear them again. And what you just said about that I didn't make this mess, but this is my community, so I'm going to clean it up. That's not just about water, right? I mean, and that, man, I just like, I'm holding on to that. So thank you for saying that. But really, I appreciate all of you for sharing, and your poem. I hope you will share that again. More broadly, because that was amazing.
You know who else is a Black Star?
Knowledge yourself.
You know who else is a Black Star?
Knowledge yourself.
You know who else is a Black Star?
Knowledge yourself.
Be proud. Be excellent. Be yourself.
Thank you so much to all of you. You certainly do not have to stay. We can pause for a minute here if you all would like to be able to leave and go about the rest of your lives for this evening. Thank you to the parents who came too. Okay, next up, we have Daryl Young from Youth Services and Lisa, I'm going to mispronounce your last name, Prue? All right, who are going to talk to us about community education youth programming.
I don't know how you're supposed to come back from
Good luck, seriously.
that right there. That's amazing. I think for me, what was amazing was for the fact that I seen young black men represent St. Louis Park. Like, they don't really get that opportunity, so that was amazing for me. So, well, good evening. Good evening, Vice Chair Tom Back, Superintendent Osai, and members of the board. Just coming to you say thank you for letting us just present to you all about our youth programs for community education. So we're gonna go through our slides. Hope I don't get emotional because that was touching for me there. And so just for our youth programs, we have Kids Place, we have YDC, and we have youth enrichment programs. And so we're gonna just talk about what we're gonna do. And I just really want to just make sure we're focusing on that we really are here for our young people. And we really want to just, a couple words I want to take out of there is energize and enhance and spirit. We just really want to show unity with our groups here. So Lisa's going to come up and she's going to do her presentation.
Thanks, Gerald. I'm Lisa Prue. I'm a program manager for Kids Place.
And I'm Victoria Dotterer, the school-age child care coordinator.
Kids Place serves working families in St. Louis Park. We're the largest provider of child care in St. Louis Park. We're currently serving 850 plus students, 33 months to grade 5. For tonight's presentation, we'll focus on the students in elementary school, the school-age child care. We are open from 6:30 a.m. until 6 o'clock p.m. Monday through Friday, year-round. We have before and after-school care programming, full-day child care on school release days, and during the summer. We're located at each of the elementary schools on site, and then all the students come together in the summer at Central Community Center for summer programming. And the main office is also located at Central Community Center. For families who need help with tuition assistance, we accept Hennepin County Child Care Assistance for those families who qualify. Currently, Kids Place serves about a quarter of the students in elementary school.
That's a lot of kids. How do we keep them safe?
You're right, Vicki. That is a lot of students. Child care programs in Minnesota are regulated by the Minnesota Department of Human Services. So that means that over and above the policies and procedures of the school district, DHS is checking in on us and making sure that we're providing all the mandated practices to ensure health and safety of students and staff. That also means there are additional background checks required for staff before they start in child care classrooms. There are also requirements for training of all staff. So that means that all staff who work even 1 hour per year are required to have the training listed here.
Well, Lisa, that's a lot of training.
That is a lot of training, Vicki.
Does that include the substitutes?
Indeed it does. And lead program staff have additional training requirements. In addition to the DHS regulations and the school district policies, Kids Place, in order to maintain the highest quality programming, voluntarily participates in the Minnesota After School Accreditation Program. And Vicki's going to tell you a little bit about that.
Well, 2 of our sites are already accredited, and we've just finished going through the process with our other 2 sites. This process has helped us to improve the professionalism of our staff and improve the activities and environments at our sites. No matter which building you go to now, you have the same quality of programming.
What are the steps to accreditation?
Well, part of the process is that we do a self-study using observations and surveys from parents, children, staff, and hosts, and overwhelmingly we have received positive reviews. We also assemble a stakeholder team that includes not only the parents and the staff, but also we invite members of the broader community like the librarians or cooks or custodial staff and neighbors. And anybody's really invited to be on our stakeholder teams and come and observe our program and help us improve. Our 2 sites that have just completed the validation visit will receive their letters in August.
That's exciting. Hey, I've heard about the SHIP grant at Kids Place. Could you tell us more about the SHIP grant?
Well, the SHIP grant is a statewide health improvement and partnership. And through this program, we are purchasing materials so that we can do more culturally relevant cooking projects and snacks. And we are also creating playground handbooks at each of our sites and doing training for our staff on active playgrounds and purchasing equipment for those playgrounds.
I jumped ahead there, now I've spoiled it. But so there's a lot of exciting things going on at Kids Place. What's coming up?
There are many exciting things, and now we're ramping up for our summer program. We have a very popular summer program, and it's grown by 34% over the last 5 years. Children in our program have the opportunity to develop their social skills, do fun and entertaining math, reading, science, arts, sports, and explore their own interests for up to 11 and a half hours each day. We also get to go on many field trips. During the school year, we go on 15 or more field trips, and during the summer, they get to go on more than 20 field trips. Besides our local favorites like Roller Gardens, which we rent out just for our Kids Place kids a couple times during the summer, we do Texatonka, Park Tavern's very popular with the kids, and the rec center. And also our children enjoy going to museums, theaters, tours, and nature field trips.
Vicki, Kids Place sounds like it might be a really fun place to work.
Kids Place is an excellent place to work, and many of our staff have been with us for more than 10 years. This lady here is her name is Lori, and she's been with us for more than 20 years. One of our students here has been with us since the infant program. We have many students who are still with us, and they started in our infant program. A lot of our students start with our preschool program, and many of them come back to work with us when they're over 18 years old. This is one of our student Lindgren students.
Vicki, how long have you worked here?
And I have worked here for 31 years. I have 2 kids that have gone through the program. I have a middle schooler now, and I also have a 4th grader that started in the infant program.
Excuse me?
Kids love Kids Place. Their parents love Kids Place. The staff love working for Kids Place. And Kids Place loves the youth program, who we've partnered with for many, many summers. And now we would like to introduce Colleen and Daryl.
Extra points for the witty banter in your presentation.
I'm not going to try to tout that at all either. So I'm going to speak about our youth enrichment programs. And so, St. Louis Park Youth Enrichment offers a wide variety of after school, before school, and night classes for grades 6 through 8. I'm excited because we have Grandmasters of Chess, we got Boys Hip Hop. This year we just started learning how to bowl as a class. And we just did family pasta making, which was good. And this spring we just started our driver's ed program with Safeway Driving School for our teens as well. Our enrollments as of April 1st was over 1,000 participants, which I'm very excited about. And then now I'm excited about YDC, our youth groups. But Colleen, you're supposed to go up. I'm so sorry. I stole her spot. Hold up. Go back. There you go.
All right, Daryl said most of what I was going to say, but I will just touch on one thing about summer. So we're also gearing up for summer, and our summer program is called Summer Learning and Play. I'm Kayleen, by the way. I'm the program assistant working with Daryl in youth enrichment programs. So we partner with Targeted Services to provide classes to those students who are in Summer Learning Academy. They can take a select few of our classes that happen right after Summer Learning Academy at no cost to families. And we have very strong enrollment for those Summer Learning Academy students. And we also have other classes that are open to the general public that anyone can sign up for, taught by St. Louis Park teachers and by vendors. So, thank you.
And Colleen threw up the peace sign when she got done, so we're going to keep going. So we're going to talk about Youth Development Committee, YDC, which is our is like I want to say my baby. It's basically our youth leadership from grades 6 through 12. And there's opportunity for young people to be trained in youth leadership and just be able to like get in the community, do some things, be more hands-on. So we have an annual kickoff, we have monthly meetings, I get to spoil my young people with getting mellow glazed donuts for them in the morning and stuff. But they have an opportunity to just get back to their community. And now I'm gonna speak about HAS program. This is a program I just created this year. It's for mainly our young black boys over at the middle school. The students will have access to do some creative things. Like today, our young people are learning how to make apps. So they're going to create an app. And it's just 6 to 8 young black boys I have there. They're learning how to create an app. The app is going to be amazing tomorrow. They're about to create. They're going to create custom-made shoes. So by the end of the school year, they're gonna have their own custom-made shoes. Then they already got some professional haircuts by celebrity barbers. And the reason why I was doing this is because growing up, I never had this in middle school, and this was an opportunity to give something different, you know. And also they're able to learn about financial literacy. And I feel like when you look good, you feel good, you're gonna do your best, and that's what I wanted for our young black boys. And so these are some of the photos. On the left-hand side, it was a recent photo from last week. That is Ackway's barbershop. He is the celebrity barber to a lot of celebrities and Carl Anthony Towns. We have Assorted Sneaker Geeks. This is a program. This young lady here, she takes donated shoes from the community, refurbish them, and sell them back to kids for like $25. And so those are some of the shoes that she created. And she just started a couple of celebrity basketball games. And now we're going to have a student voice by the name of Victoria. She's going to speak for a second.
Good evening, I'm Victoria Caraballo. I'm an 11th grader at the high school. So I participate in the YDC program here at the high school, and it gives me a good opportunity to see Daryl more often because I'm not at the middle school anymore. And it gives us opportunities to get together on the weekends and do some community service work. And we also get to learn about different things. He has different topics for us each meeting that we get to talk about and discuss in our early meetings. And the donuts. The donuts are amazing. You guys should get some.
So there's no way you could actually do a youth program without youth voices. So that's why we wanted to have Victoria here today or tonight. So the next slide says questions. If you have any questions, you may do so at this time. Thank you.
Extra points to Daryl for bringing a student to talk to us. Yeah, truly, you are one of the most resourceful people that I know. I love the programs that you're doing, especially the speakers that you're bringing in and the people that you're connecting with. We're working with celebrities and doing haircuts and shoes and all that cool stuff. That's just awesome.
Thank you.
Who else has questions?
I have a few questions.
Oh, here we go, Ken. I'm ready.
One at a time?
17.
Okay.
All right, so I want to start with the cooking piece. So
Okay.
where do you guys do that at? I don't think we have facilities, except that one room that's kind of tired, to do any of that kind of pasta making and so on and so forth. Do you do that? It looked like you were at Minneapolis at the old Sears building.
Oh, no.
No?
We did that here. Well, Colleen, you want to speak more about that?
Yeah, so we partnered with Way Cool Cooking School. It's a cooking school in Eden Prairie, and they came here to like the home ec room or whatever. They definitely came early and like scrubbed and cleaned everything down because they were like, this is like not up to our clean standard. So they came in, cleaned everything out, but they were like, yeah, this is great. It's kind of just like sitting there, but it all works. It all works. So yeah. And it's clean.
But then it also kicks into the point of relationships between the parents and their kids. And then they're able to learn how to cook, being there with their family, which is a bonding situation, which was great. So, yeah.
And then that youth program that you have is fantastic. I think I visited once at Peter Hobart, but I think you've moved it to a different level than what was at that point. I think that's fantastic that you're teaching some of those things, especially financial literacy and how to go and get your hair cut and all those important community things that you're teaching them. It's great that you're doing that. The question would be, how can you expand that to a larger group than 6?
So I would just say that personally, I wanted to go out and get the students myself, the ones I know. I went for the kids that people were not talking to or really not acknowledging, and then I just poured myself into them. For one, they don't have to pay for nothing. For 2, I want to next year, be able to do it for young ladies and guys. So I want to put it together and really kind of expand it to a whole different level. Next year, I really want 20. I want 20 students next year. And they're going to do it for about 6 sessions. And, hopefully next fall we could, wrap it up to hopefully 20. But it's definitely 6th grade to 8th grade. I was gearing for 8th grade at first because I want the young black men to be able to go to high school on a whole different level with self-esteem and they feeling good. But what they're learning right now is relationships. And because of the relationships they were able to build during that their haircut appointments, now the guys are like, the celebrity guys are like, no, we want that kid to come to the barbershop. We want him to meet Carl Anthony Towns and all these other guys that come to the barbershop. And the kid just felt so good. He said, this is the first time I got a haircut in 6 months. He felt so good, and the teachers were acknowledging him when he was going through the halls the next day. So that was the real purpose of that. So they could hold their head high, walk through the hallways, and go to class and be successful.
Okay. All right, so I'll take you off this now. On the childcare. So which facilities are accredited?
Currently, Central Community Center is accredited, and so is Susan Lindgren. And Aquila just had their visit, and Peter Hobart has their visit on Tuesday.
And which are very popular and very busy places. How is the accreditation for, I assume it's happening this year, throughout this year's time, how will the new busing and the change of the child care from daytime to afternoon, or however it's going to work out, how do you think that accreditation is going to be able to continue to happen as we're trying to ramp up for the future?
Well, we're accredited for 3 years, and accreditation doesn't really stop when you get the letter certifying you. You continually, every single year, do surveys, you still meet with your stakeholder team, and you still make action plans every single year to improve upon the last year. So really the process just keeps going. No matter what you have, you just adjust year after year.
Just because Ken brought it up, I just want to acknowledge that we've seen you recently, as we were talking about the start times and going through that process, and just acknowledge the work that your team did throughout that process to provide us with information as we were making that decision, and to thank you in advance for the work that you're going to do over the next year. So we're just, I know we've put a lot on your plates that are already quite full, and you're going to have an amazing summer, and then I think we're going to really look forward to seeing you again next year. And as we kind of go through this process of dreaming up the next phase for Kids Place. So thank you, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I did find my final question. It was on the SHIP grant. So can you talk about that a little more? Because that's, again, into the food and food securities and things. So can you talk, how are you working that out?
Well, the SHIP, we have a representative from them that meet with us, and we chose a lead at every single site, and she's met with them separately. She's done surveys with the kids and with the staff to really make it their own at each different site. So each site looked at a food piece that they wanted to do and an activity piece that they wanted to do. So each site got to choose, say, for instance, we have healthy snacks. We serve fruits and vegetables at least twice a week, but just because of the storage of the not having the refrigeration, we can only do it twice a week. So one of the things we were looking at was maybe getting more cold storage so we could have fruits and vegetables more than 2 times a week. And then as far as the activities, getting all the staff on the same page as far as what kind of rules do you have on the playground, new activities that we can do with the kids, really looking around and seeing if there are kids just sitting on the playground instead of being active. We got all the staff on the same page. They mapped out their playgrounds as to what spaces there are and where they're going to put staff and different activities staff can do in those spaces so that everybody's getting the same experience no matter which school you're at.
And the ship grant is 2 years or 3?
It's just 1 year, but we can renew. It's all about creating processes. It's not just about providing food or taste tests. It's about creating processes that you're going to continue to use.
Okay. So the last question, and you can just take this off to the back if you like, and it is around, are you guys considering using gardens or anything in the summer with the SHIP grant?
Well,
Or
currently,
help you snack that way?
we can't use it because we already have a fantastic garden at Central. If you have not seen it, it's all at the front playground. Well, we have a garden lady that we pay for every summer, and all of the kids have a weekly garden class where we learn some cooking with the stuff we grow. They teach them about the plants that we're growing, and they're all involved in growing things. And it's been wonderful because when the kids see the beans hanging off the stalk, they go over there and they just eat them raw. They're trying things that they would not try at your house. But yeah, we've had a terrific garden program for the last 4 or 5 years that we've been working on that, and we've grown more than we need. So we always have a cart in the hallway as we harvest things. Families can come by and take stuff home with them. At Central, yes.
But the other facilities,
Susan
yeah.
Lindgren started, their PTO started a garden at their site. Hopefully at PSI, maybe we can use some of the money next year to start a garden over at Susan Lindgren. The thing about having the garden in the summer, we do it at Central because all of Kids' Place is there all day. So we have the opportunity to go out and tend to the garden. It's a little bit harder at your other sites because there's not really students there during the day to go out and take care of those gardens.
Okay, thank you all so much. All right, next up, long-term facility maintenance funding strategy. Brought to us by Patricia Magnuson, Director of Business Services, and Tom Bravo, Facilities Manager.
Okay, good evening, Vice Chair Tom Beck, Superintendent Osai, and members of the board. We're going to give you a little overview of long-term facility maintenance tonight. Tom Bravo is here in case you have some specific questions about the project, but tonight our purpose is to recommend a change in our funding strategy in St. Louis Park Public Schools. And we are doing it now so that we can undergo this change if the board agrees, while our buildings are already under construction, so we can fully utilize the funding tools that the legislature has made available to us so that we can address some of our growing deferred maintenance demands and be preemptive against rising construction costs, all of which we are experiencing. So tonight, I want to take you through a little bit about the background, so just a little teaching about what long-term facility maintenance is. You're going to hear me referring to it as LTFM, but it's formally known as long-term facility maintenance. I'm going to teach you a little bit about the funding strategies that we're learning about. We have a recommendation for you and then some next steps. And there are next steps around LTFM funding every year, regardless of what the funding strategy is. So the next steps are just the steps that we would normally take while incorporating a new strategy. So I just want to give you a little bit of background. LTFM funding has only been in place since fiscal year 2017. So it's one of the tools that the legislature has made available to us. And it has allowed the district to free up funding in other places. So prior to 2017, school districts like St. Louis Park did not have access to deferred maintenance funding in the ways that about 25 of the largest districts in the state of Minnesota had access to somewhat unlimited board-approved funding for deferred maintenance. 2017 was a game changer for districts like St. Louis Park, because we could then begin to use fully utilize general fund for things like teachers and staff salaries, sort of holding class sizes where they're at, the costs of transportation, the costs of employee benefits, the day-to-day operations of facilities. All of those things can be paid for from the general fund, but we can also, as a school district, fund deferred maintenance out of the general fund. And during a time when we did not have another option like LTFM, that would be a demand against the general fund. The opposite is not true, however, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Then in operating capital, we talked a little bit last time we were together about operating capital. So it can be used for new equipment purchases, things like textbooks, software, day-to-day building maintenance, and again, also deferred maintenance. So prior to having another place like LTFM funding, to take deferred maintenance, we would be competing for a roof that's leaking against a textbook purchase that we might need to implement new curriculum or software to implement new curriculum. And then, of course, we have our voter-approved bond issue that is funding new construction, some building additions, and some remodeling. And there's also a little bit of deferred maintenance in our voter-approved bond issue. LTFM allows us to have another place, so we don't have to take up our voter-approved bond issue with deferred maintenance needs, because the legislature has provided us a way to pay for those essential costs of our buildings. So I'm not sure about why this is all happening, but I'll just flip through why these items are coming in on the presentation. So LTFM, long-term facilities maintenance, is a tax levy. So it's one of the many line items in the tax levy. And it's an equalized levy, which simply means it's a mix of aid and levy, depending on the property wealth of a school district. In St. Louis Park, it's 100% levy. So it's a tax levy that's been in place in St. Louis Park since 2017. So here's how the formula works. It's $380 per adjusted pupil unit. So that's about $2 million to St. Louis Park. And we've been levying that since the law has been in place. In addition to that limit of funding, which is an amount per student, the legislature allows districts on a project-by-project basis to also use LTFM funds to pay for health and safety projects that are greater than $100,000 per site. We have never done that in St. Louis Park, so we've kept our funding limited to the $380 per pupil unit. So it's a conversation I think it's important for us to entertain, making sure we access other funds that are available to the district, and I'm going to talk to you about how that could look. So LTFM provides school board approved funding for deferred maintenance, for health and safety, and for accessibility. So however, okay, so I just want to go back and make sure you understand. So deferred maintenance are things like building envelope, making sure we seal up our building, hardware and equipment, electrical needs, interior surfaces, all of those things you think about in deferred maintenance Health and safety are like physical hazard corrections, asbestos abatement in those places where it's needed, fire safety, all of those health and safety related projects, and then accessibility as well. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the LTFM funding as well. When we talked about operating capital, I told the board that the operating capital funding was based on our average building age in our district being about 45 years. Do you remember that conversation? What I found out, and I've never been in a district that has buildings the age of St. Louis Park, some of them nearly 90 years old, in 80 and 90 years old. That is a capped formula. So the operating capital formula limits any building to 50 years of age. So the actual average building age in St. Louis Park is 60 years. So it's just crawling past 60 years. So there are some deep deferred maintenance needs that any building would have, but especially in a building that's aging, or buildings that are aging like ours. It's important also to talk about the things LTFM funding cannot be used for, because in my experience, when community members see cranes and roofs being replaced, a normal question is, so why can't we reduce class size? Or why can't we do something else? We can afford to do that, but we can't afford to do this. The great thing, I showed you how LTFM funds would sometimes encroach on other funding sources that could do those things, that could keep class sizes low. But what we have in LTFM are funds that can only be used for certain things, but can't be used for general operations to construct new facilities. So there's a difference between deferred maintenance and adding on or building new facilities. We can't even remodel a building. Go ahead.
And this is just so typical with public education funding. There are, 22 different pots of money, and they all have a different set of rules as to how we can utilize it.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I've noted the statute there. These are words right out of statute. It's this specific. So again, we need to take advantage of the funding that has been available for us. And it's there, and it cannot be used for these other purposes. For ergonomics, for violence prevention and safety and security, it's often a question, why can't we add cameras? Why can't we change our front entrances for safety and security? Explicitly not allowed for LTFM funding. But there are things that we can do with the funding. So I want to talk to you about the strategies that are available. So St. Louis Park has exclusively done the strategy on the left-hand side, what we call a pay-as-you-go levy. The other strategy is to use bonds, to sell bonds, specific long-term facility maintenance bonds to pay for projects. And of course, we can do a blended strategy, do a little bit of both, and that's actually what we're recommending we move forward with. So a pay-as-you-go levy is just like it sounds. We levy some money, and then we pay for the projects as we go. So as I discussed, we have a $2 million limit in our pay-as-you-go levy funding available under the formulas, because we are a district that is limited to that dollar amount. So there's some things about that make sense. It's easy to understand. We got $2 million, we do $2 million worth of projects. It's easy for me to explain and for Tom to explain to the board. Very easy to understand. There's no interest costs. We're just paying for things as they go. We're not bonding for projects. And it's funded annually. So it makes sense. Those are some of the pros. Some of the cons of a pay-as-you-go exclusive strategy to long-term facility maintenance is we cannot complete large projects. It's hard to attack a major roofing project or a major mechanical upgrade with only $2 million, and Tom can tell you more about that in detail. So therefore, we can't do big projects, and then it limits the number of projects we can attack in any given year. So our deferred maintenance continues to become deferred. So it just begins to exacerbate our project deferral. So our buildings are getting older and older, projects are more and more deferred, and that becomes a problem. Here's some of the pros and cons of bonding. So what we would do is just like a voter-approved bond issue, we'd sell bonds. We're recommending 15-year bonds, and then we pay them back over whatever period of time. So the $2 million includes the cost of the principal and interest. So, and we're not talking about $2 million worth of principal and interest here. We're talking about half of that. but that's how we would fund with a bond issue. And so what happens then, the good thing is we can stretch our LTFM dollars. We can do larger projects and multiple projects in 1 year and begin to really get ahead of the deferred maintenance needs and not just continue to defer projects more and more. So it reduces the further deferral of projects. The cons are it's complex. So this is hard to explain. We're going to try to just chunk this off for you a little bit at a time because we do have time to get this strategy in place and answer your questions. There are interest costs associated with a bond issue. The offset to that, and I might refer to this in a later slide, is prices are going up rapidly for materials and labor associated with construction, so we either pay it in interest or we pay in rising costs. So you could think about it in that way. And the con is that we're paying for projects over multiple years, but these are major projects, and we believe St. Louis Park Public Schools is a going concern, and these buildings will be here, so it makes sense to fund them with that strategy. So why would we change? I just wanted to make this very clear for you that our deferred maintenance demands are growing, and it's because we continue to defer them. And we've got rising construction costs that we're experiencing for a lot of reasons. There's general inflation, and there's some factors in receiving materials that have changed in our current political environment that are continuing to grow and make costs really questionable in the future years, and they're rising very rapidly. And in this environment with full employment, it's harder and harder to keep labor costs down. So labor and materials are rising. In construction, we've got our buildings already under construction over the next several years due to the voter-approved bond issue. So it's a wise time to find some efficiencies in completing some other projects while the buildings are wide open anyway. And Tom can, again, talk to you about that. And again, it's important, I believe it's important to fully utilize the funding tools the legislature has made available to us. Particularly now, we're waiting in a funding year, and there's a lot of things that we need, but the legislature has done some things for us, for public school districts, and long-term facility maintenance is one of them. So we are recommending a bond issue, and the bond issue would be to accelerate our most pressing deferred maintenance projects. So the 10-year plan that we would bring forward would be the same projects that we've had on our list, but we would accelerate projects into the first and second year of the 10-year plan rather than putting them out to the third, fourth, fifth year. We would accelerate priority projects while we're under construction, and we have some projects in mind that make sense, in particular at the high school. Some priority projects that we really should be doing while we're in that building anyway. And it creates some flexibility so that we can absorb rising construction costs. We have ways to utilize our funding that's available to help us use our voter-approved bond issue funding in a wise way. I'm going to just say that sentence plainly. We have a voter-approved bond issue for projects that we promised to our community. We are fearful and getting anxious about rising construction costs, and so we'd like to talk to you about taking some of the deferred maintenance projects that were funded in the voter-approved bond issue, bringing them over into LTFM so that we can create flexibility in case costs rise to a point that we can't sufficiently fund them. We aren't at that place yet, but we want to make sure that in advance of something like that happening, that we can keep the promises that we've made to voters and be really thoughtful about it. So it's a strategy we'd like to propose. So again, the things to consider. We have a growing tax base, like many school districts, and St. Louis Park has a strong tax base, which reduces the tax impact. We've been in conversation almost daily with Ehlers and Associates, who helped you through the voter-approved bond issue. And as you know, and as always, even in the slides we'll show you tonight, they use very conservative estimates in tax rate growth. So this will have no impact on taxes, but I want to talk to you about what that sentence means, and I have some more details about that. And again, this point about we have rising construction costs coming in the future. We can pay that, or we can pay the cost of interest to get some of this work done. And we're in a fairly decent interest rate environment still for tax-exempt bond issues. We also are recommending we continue with a pay-as-you-go levy so that we don't abandon that strategy, because there will be projects that come up on an annual basis. We fund a lot of our health and safety ongoing program, our entire health and safety ongoing program, out of our pay-as-you-go levy. So we don't want to absorb all of our $2 million in funding with a bond issue. So we're keeping well over 50% of the funding available. And some districts go up much higher than that, as high as 80% of LTFM funding is absorbed in principal and interest, but we're holding back at 50%. I want to take you through some of the details. Are those up? I think those are coming up next. So then I'll come back to next steps. So this is a super complicated spreadsheet, but I think it's really important for you to see it and try to understand just some of the high points. And we've got some time, as you can see in our next steps, but I want you to just notice the things that are important to see. So this is preliminary for discussion only. You can see at the top, it's a concept that we landed on to show you tonight. So there's two separate bond issues here that this is talking about. One bond issue would be for projects that fall in that health and safety over $100,000 category. So this would be funding that would go above the $2 million annually. So this is a brand new concept for St. Louis Park Public Schools to issue health and safety long-term facility maintenance bonds. And it is for $15 million. So we can talk, if you like this concept, we'll come back with a lot more details for you. But what this includes are mechanical projects and indoor air quality projects that were deferred into the future on our regular 10-year plan. But it also includes $7 million worth of deferred maintenance projects that we would bring over from the voter-approved bond issue to provide that flexibility against rising costs in those construction projects that we cannot fund anywhere else. There's no other place to fund those projects. So this is what it looks like. What we've done, I want to have you just look at the proposed new debt columns. Can you see where my cursor is there? It's those columns, and this just shows you a 15-year bond issue and what principal and interest could look like. This proposal starts to pay principal immediately. There's some other proposals that would keep tax rates, would drop tax rates. This keeps tax rates level. We landed here thinking that it's wise to just start paying down principal as quickly as we can to reduce interest costs over time. I want you to notice a couple of other things on here. If you go way over to the left, this is the change in the tax rate, and I just want you to notice that we experienced an 8% and will be experiencing probably at least a 6% increase in our tax base in St. Louis Park Public Schools. So your denominator on tax rates. So that's going to drive tax rates down as they grow. And Eller's built in a 2% increase and then a 0% increase out into the future. That's where this is very conservative, because we don't want to promise that tax rates could be going down or staying level when that's not really true. So using some very conservative assumptions here. We're also using a 3.2% interest rate. Also a conservative rate, but we will time a bond issue if the board supports this concept, as Ellers would advise, to take advantage of the best market possible, but we can't ever know that for sure. So that's what I want you to see here. So this next slide then shows you what would happen. So what we're saying is that here is our current tax rate. You've seen this before. A concept like this when the board approved the voter-approved bond issue. And what we know is that the tax impact is less than we thought. That is because we used very conservative estimates. There's a history of doing that here in the district so that we don't underperform on our tax rates. But what this shows you is, given those assumptions, that little blue part is the new concept of funding that we would be proposing in St. Louis Park, that we add some health and safety bonds that go beyond the $2 million of regular funding. So changing the way we use the $2 million of funding doesn't do a thing. We've been spending $2 million every year. We're now just going to convert that to principal and interest rather than paying for projects $2 million at a time. So that's all embedded in the red part. That has zero impact on tax rates. It's just a change in strategy. But what we're proposing is to not dip into that $2 million in places that we have other funding available. And that's for these projects as approved by the board and as approved by the Department of Education for singular projects at a building that are over $100,000. So the blue represents that increase, and what you will see is that the principal and interest plan that we put in place, we could have put one together that lowered these costs by deferring principal payments. This is just a little more cost effective because it will lower our interest costs over time by paying principal up front. And so it keeps our tax rates flat, and then we still experience this big drop in taxes as some bond issues expire, become paid off. And you've seen this in the past, so nothing different except some new assumptions built in. The next slide is very similar to the last. This other issue is what Ellers has done is propose breaking them into two. So one bond issue is for this new concept of health and safety. The other bond issue is just for the regular $2 million. It's for the deferred maintenance that we would accelerate forward. And the thing that's most important here, now here's your potential new bond cost, but to remember this is part of the red. We've always been spending $2 million a year. There's nothing new about this. So zero tax impact. But what I want you to see over here is that this is the total general fund revenue, LTFM, long-term facility maintenance revenue, that would be remaining. So there's $2 million available in this year. $919,000 would go toward principal and interest on this $10 million bond issue, leaving a full $1 million of regular LTFM funding available for things that pop up that we hadn't thought of, for our regular health and safety program, personal protective equipment, and our safety and science labs, all of those projects that continue annually. Okay, so now I just want to go back and talk about next steps. So the concept is a combination. We would do our normal $2 million long-term facility maintenance levy. Embedded in that would be principal and interest payments on some accelerated projects. And then we're proposing adding a new expanded dollar amount of the $2 million for health and safety projects. So that's what's going to happen, and it's the normal process using funding in a different way. So what we'd like to do at the May 28th board meeting is to bring a 10-year LTFM plan forward, our revenue and expenditure plan using this concept, and then the board could discuss that and take action that night on the 10-year plan. And then what the board would do would be to approve a resolution of intent to sell bonds, and I believe you have done that before. What it does is allows us to work with our financial advisor to determine when is the right timing for the bond sale. So the board's made the approval. Of course, you would have to accept the bids from the bonds on the day that we sell them. So we're talking about that being sometime in the summer, meaning sometime after the board approves, all the way into September. You know, we'd want to get this going as soon as possible. And as usual, in September, the board would approve the preliminary levy for taxes payable in 2020. It would include this revised 10-year plan, the normal $2 million, and then the additional costs for health and safety projects over $100,000 per site. So this is complicated, and it's one of the downsides of utilizing this blended strategy. It's just complicated to explain. I'm recommending it because I believe it's the best way to utilize the funding that's available to us. It gives the tools to our facilities department to really start to tackle our deferred maintenance in earnest so that we can keep these buildings in a condition where our students can feel proud of them, our families can feel proud of them, and it can enhance their experiences in our schools. So I am wondering if the board has any questions.
I don't know why I raised my hand on the chair tonight. I don't know why I did. You also have it on good authority that it's going to get more expensive to paint it next summer and the summer after that. And the longer you don't paint it, actually the more it's going to cost, because the wood underneath is going to have more costs attendant to actually keeping up. And so even though you're going to have to pay interest to get the loan to pay to paint the house now, in the long run, it's probably actually going to be cheaper to get it done now. And to the last point that you were making, you don't have to look at a house that desperately needs to be painted for the next couple of years while you wait. Is that in a nutshell?
That's exactly right. Does that sound familiar, Don?
Yeah.
See, then you took a very thick and made it actually pretty easy once.
Well, I have a question, and my question is, I'll piggyback to Mary's statement of that analogy. So let's say that you had $10,000 to repaint that house, but that money's not going to come available for 2 years. Much like we're talking about bringing in the deferred maintenance. And so what happens to that $10,000 that comes in 2 years available to you? You just put that back into the general fund, or how? I didn't quite follow what would happen with that.
I'm not sure I
deferred
understand the
maintenance.
question.
So we allocated X amount of money for deferred maintenance in the future. That was part of the bond.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So that money still stays there,
Yes.
even though we bring in some new money to take care of those issues.
Yeah.
What happens to that?
So here's, if I understand it, and then Tom can, what I think I hear you saying is that we're accelerating some projects and funding them up front. So will we not need any money in the future? So have we freed up a need for funding? My belief is that the projects, and they do, continue to come, because a roof that was only 25 years old 10 years ago is now 35 years old. So items continue to age into need. So we'll continue to fill the pipeline of deferred maintenance projects. I've never seen a district or a home that doesn't continue to have needs. We'll address, each board each year gets to address the 10-year plan that they're satisfied with and the projects that they're satisfied with putting forward. And Tom, you can talk a little more about the reality on the ground here.
Thanks, Patricia. What I want to explain is that in 2017, when we went into the LTFM process, we just mainly got $400,000 for health and safety. That was it for the district. So the state said, okay, districts, tell us what your needs are. And if you remember, I put down $4 million for 2017, $4 million for 2018, and they came back and said, you're only going to get $2 million. So then I had to stretch it out. So the one thing that we're trying to do is the ones that I try to stretch out, because of the fact that the market is changing so fast in today's market, we're seeing costs, because of a good economy in many ways, it's the demand and supply. And right now, the state of Minnesota, at $1.8 billion worth of construction work in just schools alone, we're seeing that our demand is higher than what they can supply. So what they're saying to us, if you don't do it now, you're going to pay more later. And we don't really care if you can pay later, because we'll just give it to you when the costs are going up. With all the tariffs and everything else, we're just seeing those costs going higher. And the longer we wait, I don't want to come back here again and just say, okay, well, then we need more for this because we found out that steel is going up and things like that. We want to take the advantage, like I did when we bid out for the cooling units for the high school. If we would have did it today and went out to bid, it would have been $100,000 more. That's just the reality of it. So what we're asking for is, we would like to get the money up front more, like other districts are doing, based off of this process, and not raising the tax base as much, and getting them done now versus waiting later and paying more later because of the cost that we're waiting later. And that was a good analogy about the roof itself. Things underneath When water moisture goes in, it takes care of the insulation, takes care of other things that is going to make it more worse than if we would have just sealed it the first time. So that's pretty much what we're trying to do as an analogy, is just asking for most of the money up front now to take care of the issues that we're seeing problems with.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, it helps, and I 100% agree. And as you were talking, it makes sense now, in that we didn't specify what deferred maintenance we were going to put underneath that bond. We just said deferred maintenance,
Right.
of which will always happen.
Right.
So we're just bringing in some money now to get that, whatever that deferred maintenance was, get that taken care of, and not use it in the future.
Correct. And I
For
mean,
that,
this
'cause we didn't
logic is
specify.
correct. This logic it makes a lot more sense when Patricia brought forth, because I don't know if some of you remember when you were in that process of the referendum. I said, now remember, in 5 years, I am going to ask for money again because I didn't have enough to start. But this really does help take care of those issues now versus waiting 5 years when the taxpayers may have to be paying more, and we don't want to do that. So we want to take care of those issues now.
Good explanation. I think I understood it all. I just want to make 100% sure, though, when you're saying the additional money that we're bringing in, was that amount sort of matched to the growth of our tax base? So the average taxpayer won't pay any more? Is what?
Right. If you look at this slide, this is the tax rate. So it doesn't matter what value of home, the tax rate is applied to that value home. The red is what our tax rate would have been doing our normal strategy of $2 million a year, keeping in mind that we're switching some of the strategy within the $2 million and using it for principal and interest and some of it for pay-as-you-go. What's new is to access funding beyond the $2 million for specialized health and safety projects as approved by the state, as approved by the board. And our strategy was to create a principal and interest schedule that would keep the tax rate flat. We could have done something different by pushing principal payments later and actually drop the tax rate, but it doesn't make economic sense if we want to lower the cost of interest as much as possible. So the tax rates will not be rising. Some of it's strategic, some of it's just that was our normal plan, but we applied a little strategy to just keep this flat over the next several years. Did I answer your question?
I think so. It's just, I think tax rate is used different ways, different places. But this would be, you'd multiply this percentage times the value of the home, basically, and maybe this other multiplier in there, but
That's right.
it's basically a percentage.
A percentage of value, yes. So a larger home, a higher valued home would have a higher dollar tax because the rate's applied to a higher value home.
Thank you.
So we'll talk a little bit about the home stuff, because it's taxpayers who own homes that pay the stuff. So when my husband and I did a big remodeling project, we were surprised to find out a good chunk of our house didn't have any foundation underneath it, and we never would have known that had we not started the construction project. So I had some money set aside for new kitchen appliances as a want, but when we realized, oh, we don't have any foundation under this part of the house, that's where the money went. So I'm curious, Tom, as we started going into our huge array of projects, we've got old buildings. We've put off stuff and put off stuff and put off stuff. Did you have anything like that pop up as a surprise?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've had it, and that's what the contingency was all about. But what this more or less saying is that we want to not only do those areas that we promised the taxpayers, is that we want to take care of not from A to C, because we're doing A to B, from B to C, and just finish it all now, because we don't know in 2 years, 3 years from now what it's going to cost. Well, we do know, I guess, it's going to cost us a lot more than what it is today. So as long as we're in an advantage where we have a contractor, where economies of scale says if you do a lot more now, you're going to be paying a little less, just like we found out when we ordered our furniture, best example. If we would have ordered furniture per classroom, it would have been this amount of money, but because we did it as a total, it was this amount, and we got a lot more out of it. So that's what we're hoping to do with this one, is that with the long-term facility maintenance, we know there's a lot of indoor air quality issues, and indoor air quality issues are mainly mechanical and electrical systems and things like that. So we want to take care of those now, just so that we don't have to worry about it later when it does come up, because you're right, they're going to be unexpected. And we did see a few. When we went into the tunnels, we saw some pipes that weren't there that we thought were there, things like that. But we had our contingency for those things. But we know that those do come up, just like the foundation.
I also, like Mary, I want to commend you on this presentation. It's and in particular in sort of the educational piece you did at the beginning to sort of lay the vocabulary out for us. I don't think I'm quite ready for the test yet, but I really have a much stronger understanding, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm absolutely I feel like I know enough to be supportive of moving forward to another meeting. So I don't know if other people want to weigh in on that, but I'd like to see this again. And I do have a question. This may be for Tom. I'm not sure. I know the legislature. Who knows what's going to happen? It's anybody's guess. Any day. Who knows? But in the House bill, there is a provision to allow long-term facilities maintenance to include certain school safety improvements. I've got the language right here, including remodeling or new construction for school security enhancements, public announcement systems, emergency communications, or equipment and facilities modifications related to violence prevention and facility security. So would that change our strategy? Is there anything, or are we've got that all laid out in the plan already, and it's not really going to matter? Yeah, what we did was, remember last year when we submitted for these grants and so forth, and they changed the kind of the rules because they got so many schools that submitted. And again, like Patricia was saying, the bigger schools had a bigger opportunity because they had more to submit, or more schools. We were a smaller school. When we talked to the state, we said, what happens to those? Because it's not fair that they continue to get them and we as a smaller district don't. And he said, the ones that got them, those are going to go off the list. You're now going to compete with the remaining part of it. So ours are submitted already. We're just waiting now for that final governor saying, yep, the money's available, and we're going to call right away the next day and say, we want to make sure that ours are still in the queue. So what you're saying is that when we are advocating the legislature in the next couple of weeks, that we've got bigger fish to fry than this.
And Tom's talking about the grants that were made available, and you're talking about a provision that I have personally lobbied for in another school district to expand to a fourth item that LTFM can fund. Health and safety, deferred maintenance, accessibility, and we would add safety and security for schools as a fourth item. And it's important for school districts. And what I believe is that we would want to put together a really thoughtful strategy about what we would want to accomplish with those funds. Right. If we had more safety and security funding available, we're working on a really thoughtful approach with our local officials as well. That is one of the good reasons to keep 50% of that funding available every year, so we can address some of those. Or we might have to come back to you with a new strategy. I don't think the items that we have in place for this strategy, this 10-year plan that we're proposing, are urgent, and those wouldn't change if we had another. And we will need time to put a really thoughtful project together that the board could support and understand.
It's likely that this may come up again at the legislature in another year.
Right.
So maybe we'll be able to put together something for that. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Okay, next up is the core planning report by Sarah Thompson, Director of Communications and Community Relations, and our Superintendent, Aston Osai.
Good evening, Vice Chair Tombeck, members of the board. This evening, Sarah and I will provide a very brief overview or a review of our annual core planning meeting that took place on April 18th at City Hall. And I would like to just first start off by acknowledging everyone who participated in the event. I know that 2 board members have been a part of the process since the beginning, Director Casey and Director water. So thank you for your participation and continued support of the process. This meeting, just like all of the other meetings, provided us with a lot of positive feedback and a lot of areas that we need to be mindful of as we move forward. And Sarah, a little bit later, will talk about some of those things, because the information that we received from our stakeholders has started to shape where we see the results, or the deliverables, as we've called them, for our work in the 5th year of the strategic plan. So what's in store for the time that Sarah and I have with you this evening is that I'll provide a very high-level overview of our strategic plan, and Sarah will then just talk a little bit about the 4-year core planning team annual update, the process and objectives, and dig into what our goals were or result statements for this year, and start to foreshadow the areas that we heard come out of the meeting for our priority work next year. And Sarah will close us up by just talking a little bit about what we're going to do as it relates to process, being that we're coming into the 5th year of our current 5-year plan. So our mission, I think we all know this mission. Many of you are a part of developing it, so I won't ask you to recite it at this point, but instead I just want to thank you for the permission and responsibility that this mission allows us to work hard and work courageously to meet the needs of all of our students and families here in St. Louis Park. And similar to our mission, the core values of our organization are foundational, as they allow us, with the permission and responsibility, and hold us up to do the work that's necessary to meet the needs of students and families. As a part of our core planning meeting on April 18th, we did an exercise in which we really just, with members of the core planning team, assessed the either not necessarily effectiveness, but how if these core values have been operationalized in our organization. And the unique piece about it is that in many instances, members of the core planning team could see where particular core values were being operationalized in some times, and that in other times that they weren't, right? So one of the pieces that came out of it is that we've not yet consistently operationalized or created a space where these core values exist all of the time for our students and families. So what you'll see on the screen in front of you is that as part of the exercise, members of the core planning team utilized color-coded dots to kind of highlight where they felt that they saw these core values showing up in the daily lived experiences of our students and families. And the items that were green were those areas in which, just for a lack of a better term, I'll use operationalized, but that that core planning team members saw consistently throughout our entire system. And the items that are currently red are places where core planning team members couldn't say that they saw these items, these core values showing up consistently. But I do want to mention that certainly members of the core planning team saw these core values showing up. It just wasn't consistently all of the time. And clearly, being that this is a foundational piece of our strategic plan, it's ultimately our goal to make sure that all of these core values show up every single day for all of our students and all of our families. With the strategies, and Sarah here very shortly will talk a little bit about the results under each strategy that were reported out, and then by sharing some of the work that we'll be moving into for next school year, she'll be talking about the feedback that we received and really the areas that the core planning team believe that should be our next areas of focus connected to each of these strategies. But just from a review standpoint, everyone is familiar that we have 4 strategies connected to our strategic plan. Our first strategy is around teaching and learning. Our second strategy is around systems and structures. Our third strategy is around community collaboration. And our fourth strategy around facilities, which you just heard a presentation about long-term facilities maintenance and how all of those connect together. So what I'll do at this time is turn it over to Sarah, who will just provide a high-level overview of the process and objectives of our time together on 18.
Thank you, Superintendent Osai. As Aston mentioned, this was our year 4 update, and so just wanted to take a little trip down memory lane of how we got this far. So the plan started in 2015,
and that was our creation year. And then years 1 through 3 after that, we worked with Transformation Systems, and Susan Hintz was our leader through that work. Susan retired last year, and so we needed to take a look at the process and decide how we wanted to do this work going forward. And so Superintendent and I spent a lot of time and some study around what is the best way to proceed. We've been using the technology of participation. This was the process we used during the start time process, and something that I've received some training in, and decided that that was an effective means for us to also use it in strategic planning. And so the whole goal of TOP is what we call it, is to truly use a process to foster authentic participation, which is, so germane to what we do in St. Louis Park and is a really nice fit for us. So what we did during the core planning team annual update this year was learn about the status of the 2018-19 results, reflect, as Aston just said, on the core values, discuss some critical issues facing SLP schools for next year, and recommend results for completion in the coming year. And as we said, we did this core planning team annual update this year at City Hall, which was new for us as well. And we want to say a big thank you to the City of St. Louis Park for letting us use the space. It was a really nice place to bring everybody together. So with that, I've just broken it out by strategy for you. Not only the achievements in year 4, you'll see those on the left side of the screen, as well as the potential work plan of what you'll see coming forward in year 5. And so we had leaders from each strategy come forward and spend some time with the core planning team. They made a presentation, they shared information. We had pre-learning for the team to do. We had sent out a very large packet electronically and offered it in paper as well for those who wanted it that way. So there was some homework coming into the day. And then, as I said, the leaders for each strategy made a long presentation about all the different things that had been achieved this year. And so strategy 1 is all about teaching and learning, focus on culturally relevant pedagogy, as well as culturally relevant teaching across the board. And that's not only teaching, but that's how do we deliver instruction. And so that's what you'll see there. And what you'll see coming next year in strategy 1 is that we'll implement a full plan to ensure our curriculum, teaching, learning practices are culturally relevant. As you've heard from Dr. Duffy, we have a thorough curriculum review process that just started this spring. We'll go all the way through next year, and I believe actually even beyond. And he's got that practice thoroughly vetted with culturally relevant pedagogy. So you'll see that coming forward as well. And then Tammy Reynolds and team are also updating the student discipline process to reflect a multi-tiered system of support. And so we've got a very thorough system in place. Now we need to just implement it as we work towards year 5. In strategy 2, structures and systems, a lot of work was done this year in the HR office around job descriptions, performance evaluations, training for supervisors. That was the focus of the work this year. And in year 5, we're going to go back to the business side of structures and systems. And Patricia Magnuson and her finance department are going to implement a new budget planning process for us. And not only will it be a process that we can use next year, it will be something that can be replicated annually and just have a standard process of every October we do this, every January we do this. And so you'll see that come forward in the coming year. In strategy 3, community collaboration, this year we worked on a translation form that could be developed, that could provide access from the sites to our multicultural liaisons. We talked about modes of communication with second language families, so we implemented some new tools. You heard of thought exchange during our school start and end times process. So some different tools to help us engage those relationships. And as you've seen again tonight, more and more opportunities for student voice was an effort area we had this year. Next year, we're going to be turning our efforts towards marketing and using marketing to increase enrollment of resident students. So this isn't trying to gather students from other districts. This is an effort to retain our own students. So if you're born in St. Louis Park, if you live in St. Louis Park, we have a strong belief that St. Louis Park Public Schools is the place where you should attend school. And so we're going to be working long and hard on a marketing plan in the coming year to capture as many resident students as we can. In strategy 4, facilities, I think not a meeting goes by where you don't hear something about facilities, it seems, these days. So some things we moved to lease space, we've got air conditioning, we've got pilot classrooms. We're getting really close to seeing what PSI will look like on the Cedar Manor site. And I'm sure you noticed it tonight that construction is really ramping up at the high school. So I know personally every time I drive by I see something new, so that's pretty exciting. And so again, next year, we're just going to be implementing the facilities work. So you're going to see a lot of changes. As I said, at the high school, the middle school work is going to kick up. And we will just continue implementing these plans. And so that's the kind of the 4 strategies and what we're looking at going forward. Oh, yes, thank you. Superintendent Osai just reminded me, we'll also be doing start times, a thorough plan. So that we're ready to implement a year from now. And so just so you know the timeline for that, we will have a thorough process for childcare conversations, which we're expanding a little bit from just childcare to truly elementary enrichment, because we know that not every family needs kids' place, but they might need some kind of class after school that is a bridge for a couple hours. And so we're really going to be looking at that whole enrichment category. Childcare for sure, but other options that are available, and potentially even some new partnerships with the City of St. Louis Park. So you'll be hearing about that soon as well. Okay. And so I wanted to also bring you along a little bit on timeline. So this is where we're at now. We just, as I said, wrapped up year 4. And so this summer and into fall, we'll be doing some stakeholder engagement and some data gathering. And this has 2 purposes. First purpose is for the marketing plan that I referenced a little while ago. So with all good plans, you've heard this from me a million times over, we start with research and we start with opinions and what do we know from our stakeholders. So we'll be using that data not only for marketing, but we'll also be using it to help inform the new strategic plan. So that's happening this summer and into the fall. We're going to fast track year 5 of the strategic plan, and you'll see why in a minute. But in January, we're planning the report out from year 5. So it's approximately 2 months earlier than we would typically do the report out. And the reason we're doing that is so that next year we can report out for year 5 and essentially wrap up this plan. And then we can start what the next plan will be. And we're not ready to commit to, is it a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a 20-year plan? We're not ready to commit to that yet, but we do know that the current plan has a sunset on it of 2020, and that we need to be looking at what's next. And so currently our plan is that, as I said, in January, we'll do our report out. In February, we'll start recruiting and seeking applicants for what will be a new core planning team. March through May, we'll actually do a new process so that we are ready by the end of the school year with a new strategic plan. And that's super important so that we can inform our summer work. So whether it's curriculum writing or it's professional development that needs to happen, if we have this new strategic plan in place, that will inform the work that happens over the summer in 2020. So with that, here's some more pictures of our great time at City Hall. We had a lot of fun. We filled the walls. If you've ever been in council chambers, we filled the walls and the windows with our work throughout the day. As well as, if you look in the bottom right, Karen Atkinson and Renee Robinson, one of our teachers. We also took a trip down memory lane and did a wall that's probably as big as that whiteboard of all of the pieces of the 5-year plan and what we've accomplished so far. So that's kind of a fun visual element of the work we've achieved. Any questions for either one of us?
Okay, none. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, no,
Because
I'm sorry.
I was there. I just want to give a shout out to, in particular to, I'm sounding like a broken record, but the students who engaged in that process and that day. I know they were very impactful on me, and I'm certain that they were on other people in the room as well. And I'm super interested. I mean, we saw how the student voices in the room earlier tonight really impacted us all and sort of changed the tone of the room. And it was likewise at the core planning meeting. So I'm really interested in other ways that we can hear more student voices in our strategic planning and our policy making here. So more on that, I hope.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that. And as Sarah kind of mentioned some of the next steps this summer and fall, we're not ready to release all of the details, but as you talk about students and student voice, really considering plans and strategies as we work on gathering data that will inform our next strategic plan, but also gathering data that will help inform our recruitment of our resident students. We believe our current students will play an integral role in that. So we'll be sharing more about that as we come closer to the summer here, but we're excited about the opportunities that we have in front of us. We're excited about the opportunities that we have as we think about the next strategic planning process and how we're going to center student experience and voice in that process. And I just wanted to take a moment because there's a lot that goes into bringing this all together every single year. Sarah has served as, and I can forget the name of the title, what is it called?
Internal coordinator.
Internal coordinator, right? Which means you do a whole bunch of work to make sure that every single year when you bring a large group of students, staff, parents, community members together, that they're able to have an experience that's efficient and that allows for the facilitation and learning in an effective manner. And I just want to thank you publicly because once again this year we had, I believe, a fantastic experience in which we'll be able to now take what we learned from that meeting and help inform our work moving into next school year. So thank you. Yep, go ahead, Ken.
I did actually have a question. I did write it down though. So in the strategy 1 for the work to be done in the next 5 years or work to be done, there was the piece on the we will update the student discipline process.
Yes.
So I took a note of is restorative practice or restorative justice part of that multi-tiered?
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Ken. So one of the pieces that you're probably noticing, even with the language around the work plan for culturally relevant practices and the multi-tier system support, the thing about some of this work that we're doing here in St. Louis Park is that there are no quick fix solutions, right? So it's not one year we have this goal and then the next year, voila, things have changed. But to your point, specifically as we go into next school year, related to that multi-tier system of support, where our focus will be is around training and professional development, systemically around restorative practices. So you're absolutely spot on around where that focus will be. And maybe as we move forward, it may benefit us to specifically call that out. So change the language slightly from multi-tier systems of support to calling that out in that result statement. Tonight, we just wanted to provide a high-level overview of what we heard and kind of the areas that we'll be focusing on. So thank you for your question.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Policy development, first reading of policies 515, protection and privacy of pupil records, 901, community education, and 902, use of school district facilities and equipment. So since this is a first reading in particular, let's take these one at a time. So policy 515, protection and privacy of pupil records. Any comments, thoughts, suggestions? I have one that I wanted to suggest to everybody. So I am the board's liaison to DPAC, which is our District Parent Advisory Council. And one of the issues that has come up, and Sarah could give us a lengthy presentation on this topic alone, that came up is the challenges that our PTOs experience when trying to put together student directories every fall for the school year. And one of the biggest challenges they have is collecting and compiling good and accurate information that is inclusive of the entire student body. And this is important because, as those of us who've had kids in elementary school recently know, this is how we build, one of the ways we build community at our elementary schools. This is how we get in touch with parents for play dates and birthday parties, or when our kids may be having issues, or when we want to try and coordinate childcare or rides. And so having good, accurate information for the school's families is really important. And I think one of the things that has become increasingly important is email addresses for parents in that context, especially when we've got 47, 49 different languages spoken in our schools. Oftentimes email can be a convenient and easy way for parents to be able to communicate with each other when there may be a language barrier present. The problems then exist when a lot of families may not get the forms returned to the PTOs with their contact information, because there are 1.5 million forms to be filled out floating around at the beginning of the year. And the other concern is then the people who have to physically compile all that information. It's often November or December before these directories actually get into the hands of families. And that's often too late to get that community really being built and getting going at the beginning of the year. So that is a long background of why I am going to propose that we modify the definition of directory information, which is section D on the second page of the policy, to include I'm still working on the exact language. Sarah has given me some feedback on this, and I'm thinking that we're going to add one more sentence at the very end of that introductory paragraph that says directory, something along the lines of directory information may also include, at the discretion of the district, parents' email addresses for the sole purpose of inclusion in a directory, a school directory as created by the parent-teacher organization. So the point here is that the way it stands now, if we were to just say parents' email addresses as part of directory information, any third-party organization could get access to that information and hound our families with spam and solicitations that aren't necessary. So I want to keep this very, very tailored to the fact that and what this would allow is our PTOs to PTO leadership to go to Linda Stanley in the registrar's office and get a file of everything that they would need to put in that directory. Parents' email address, phone number, just what the parents provide. And as always, parents will have the opportunity to opt out. So if families do not want that information included, it does not have to be included. But this will save families a step. It will make things much more efficient for our PTOs. It will get the directories in the hands of our families sooner. I have run this by MSBA. They say that it is totally fine. I took the step of calling the Minnesota Department of Administration, that administers data practices, and they let me know that this is fine, and I read the advisory opinion on it. So I think we're in the clear, but I wanted to see if anybody had any thoughts on that, and if everybody seems okay with it in theory, I would come back with the exact language at our second reading. Oh, right, I have to tell you, you can talk now. Okay, go ahead. Here.
So my oldest kid is 23, and I still have all the directories from when he started in kindergarten, and brilliant. Thank you for taking this on, because it's the simplest thing, and it is so hard, and it doesn't need to be. So thank you so much. I totally support this.
I think it's a great idea. When I was chairing Aquila PTO, it was very, very difficult to get those books completed. It took many, many months. So I think I think it works. But maybe just very limited personal information or something like that.
I totally agree. I've been the person in charge of directories. So to say what the process is that we typically got a file of everything except the parent email addresses. So it was very easy, except that then you had to add by hand and read people's handwriting. And I have taken 17th century paleography for my graduate degree, and let me tell you, it came in handy when I was analyzing the handwriting. So and that's why it takes so long. So totally agree. And as a parent, I think that going back and forth by email was preferred in many cases. So support. Thank you.
Great. So hang on, PTO chairs. Just one more fall, and you guys you'll have it all ready for you, hopefully this school year, if we can move this forward. Okay. Anything else on 515? This one is particularly statutorily dependent, so there is not a lot of wiggle room for us in any event to change things. So thank you to MSBA. 901, community education.
Yep. Vice Chair Tomback, policy 901 was last reviewed in 2007. Our Director of Community Education, Lisa Green, and her staff reviewed the policy and have made some recommendations, which you'll see in front of you. I do want to mention that Director Tatalovich, who couldn't be here tonight, in his review of the policy, wanted me to share that there's this one comment particularly connected to 901 in Section 4, Item B. And he said it was changed to read represents the demographics of St. Louis Park Public Schools, and he thought that the simplified language was a good goal, but thought maybe that there would be a reasonable interpretation from some community members that we're currently not doing this. So he just wanted that to be food for thought. Does that language lead to or cause people to believe that this is not something that we're currently doing? But that was the only feedback that he provided. So what you'll notice are a couple of changes, and certainly our Director of Community Ed, Lisa Green, can speak to these, but the goal was to simplify the language and to be reflective of what we're currently doing here in St. Louis Park Public Schools. And as I mentioned before, it was last reviewed and revised in 2007.
So I understand what Joe is getting at, and Joe sat on SEAC, Jim and I have sat on SEAC, Ann's been on SEAC. The whole point of it is to make sure that we have a multiple of perspectives from our community. But one thing that I think it's important to consider, the public school demographics do not neatly align with our community demographics, and so that's an important consideration. I wish it were just so nice and matchy-matchy, like our school district boundaries and our city geographic boundaries are pretty much aligned, but our schools have already a lot more diversity than our community at large, and so that, as we saw tonight with the civil rights research experience students and the takeaways that they had and the challenges for changes that they'd like to see, that really needs to be a weighted consideration as we move this work forward in community ed as it relates to the education side of the piece. It just has got to be attended to. So I understand Joe's point of view, but I'm going to respectfully submit that I think we need to go a little bit farther than just simple demographics of the schools, because the community demographics are not as far along as we are.
That the membership of Community Education Advisory Council will consist of members who represent the demographics of St. Louis Park Public Schools, comma, the City of St. Louis Park, comma, and any other groups participating in the community education programs in the school district. That's one idea. The other question I wanted to ask is Section 3, Lisa, that first sentence, I think when you changed it, maybe we lost something, or I'm not maybe reading it correctly. I think we maybe are, there just needs to be an and in there. Maybe you took out an extra clause, I'm not sure.
Oh. Yes, there should be an and after the word be licensed by MDE and oversee.
And because I'm obsessive about these things, in 2A, I would just like to have that read throughout their lifetimes with an S. Anyone else have anything for this first reading on 901?
I like Mary's amendment to to 4B. And I want to think about this as an opportunity for us to really expand and strengthen this advisory council, to make it more representative. I think it's at a good place to do that. We've had some good publicity from the Heart of the Matter community discussions for SEAC. We're looking at this policy for the first time in 12 years. The city and the school district have been working on for the past almost a year their joint powers agreement for this group. So I think it's a good time to really kind of seize the opportunity to think about what is this group, who do we represent, who is there. We're losing our student representative. Again, broken record, but we're losing our student representative because she's graduating and she's leaving us, and she's been with SEAC for since 8th grade, I think. Since 6th grade. So we're going to have the opportunity to add some more student voice to this group in the coming year. So it's just an awesome opportunity. So I think that the amendment that Mary, you offered to include, sort of be inclusive of the city and the public schools, since those are the two partners in this, would be totally fantastic.
Okay, moving on to 902, school district facilities and equipment. Superintendent Osai, do you want to give us any background about some of the proposed changes here? Once we get you back in, yeah.
Vice Chair Tomback, members of the board, what I would highlight here, so similar to 901, this policy was last reviewed in 2005. So Lisa Green, Director of Community Ed, and her staff reviewed the policy to make sure that the information in this policy was still reflective of our current practice here in St. Louis Park Public Schools. And what you'll see as kind of a consistent theme throughout this policy is equipment struck out because as Lisa and her team reviewed this policy, when it was developed, equipment was a piece that was readily rented out or to the community. In our current practice, our current state, that's not the case. So that language was taken out of this specific policy. And what you'll also notice here is that there was just a strikeout of information connected to the procedure that was in place to charge user groups for selected equipment. So really the piece was about equipment. I'll also want to call out there was some language changed from approval to review in the policy. So if you go to 4C, towards the end of that, the policy used to read a rental fee deposit and payment procedure shall be presented for approval by the school board. And what we learned is that has not been the case here in St. Louis Park, that the school board has not been approving rental scheduling fees for facilities. So what we did was revise that to review to more accurately reflect what the current practice is. So those are some of the main changes that you'll see.
Okay. At a minimum, it seems our policy should reflect what we've actually been doing for the last 10 years, so makes sense. Okay, moving on now to policy development, second reading of policies 799, post-issuance debt compliance, and 820, closing of a school building. Can take those together. Does anybody have any follow-up on them?
I just want to say that if anybody has looked at the agenda and saw a closing of a school building on the agenda, to understand that this is just a policy review on our policy on if we were to close a school building, which we are not currently doing. It's just a policy review.
What an excellent clarification. Thank you. Yes, very important. Hypothetical at this point. Okay, so moving on to our consent agenda. Is there anything that anybody wants pulled from the consent agenda? Okay, then is there a motion for approval of the consent agenda? Moved by Karen, is there a second? Second by Ken, all in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0. Okay, next, onto the action agenda. Policy development, second readings. It is recommended that the school board approve the second reading of policies 799, post-issuance debt compliance, and 820, closing of a school building. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ann, is there a second? Second by Ken, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? No. Passes 5-0. All right, communications and transmittals. Karen's got one. She spoke up first. First come, first serve here. Go for it.
So something that I really do enjoy seeing, and it's coming up on Wednesday, May 15th, our International Baccalaureate diploma candidates at the high school are going to be doing their, what's called their CAS showcase. It's for creativity, activity, and service. It's going to be in room C350 from 3:20 to 4:30. The public is invited, but you will get a chance to see work that our students, they're really passionate about it and how they take action in the community. Some of their learning, something that piqued their interest in terms of exploring. The projects are run the gamut, but it's an exciting thing to see, and I really like how that particular component helps our students enhance their spirit, because at that point they are still doing the exams and they've done the paper and they still don't know, did I get the diploma yet or not? So it's kind of a way, it's like a capstone in college, right? You get to showcase something that you really were passionate about while you were in this process with the IB diploma.
So this weekend, which would be May 18th, is the Children's First Ice Cream Social event, and it happens from 2 o'clock till 5 o'clock, would you believe? Or on Sunday, this Sunday. So the 18th? Okay, it's this Sunday, whatever day that is. The 19th. So come out and have some great free ice cream at Sebastian Joe's, and not at Sebastian Joe's, but at the Rock. Sebastian Joe's ice cream will be served, and there'll be a lot of community people there, so come and enjoy and be served by some of the board members that I saw on the list, and a lot of the community members, so enjoy that.
I was going to mention the ice cream social. I'll be serving ice cream there, but also this weekend is the middle school musical. I'm going to try and get a performance. It goes from Thursday, May 16th through Sunday, May 19th, and that day on Sundays.
Their community as local as possible, and dig into that with policy consideration, what solution be, pros and cons, how you act. There were 19 groups of students who were performing their presentation in front of each other and in front of us, or determining date and next. And I would just like to thank Ms. Cisco and Ms. students, to the students tackling of first class test-taking anxiety, vaping, sexual assault in schools. I mean, they are tackling some significant issues that are affecting them in their lives. And so I was so proud to hear them. And we talked to Superintendent of Staff to do their presentation so that we can hear them and so we can applaud them and thank them and put their attempts at advocacy to work here and advocate to us on these issues that matter to them. So, students, or more. All right. So, I will happily entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Karen. Is there a second? Anne happily seconds, and we are done. Right, we should vote on that. Man, I made it to the very last thing of the meeting before I messed something up. All right, is all in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Done.